Don't you love the high-tech music? Welcome to Still Kicking with Billy Hauer and my great producer, Pete. It is Tuesday, July 11th, 2017, and I am your host, Billy Hauer. And as you can see, I'm still kicking. Today, we're going to be talking about cowards. And sad to say, a nation of cowards. Our nation, the United States of America. And I hope you aren't turning off your computer yet, because I think this is something we really need to hear. Cowards, you know, they fear everything. And cowards, we're going to start with the business world. Cowards fear competition. So the corporate fat cats have rigged their benefit. You might be surprised to know that Charles Koch thinks the economy is rigged in this way, though I doubt he'd call his fellow oligarchs cowards, but they are. Not only is the system rigged in their favor because they write the laws, they also get massive government welfare, directly and through the tax code. How many Tesla cars would be sold without massive tax credits? The answer is in Hong Kong this week, where Tesla sales have come to a standstill. In April, they sold 0 cars in Hong Kong. And Hong Kong is a big luxury car market. There's a lot of rich people there. And the reason they're not selling any Teslas all of a sudden is that the Hong Kong government slashed the tax break for buying electric vehicles. Tax credits for Teslas are huge here too. They're $7,500. So every time you see a Tesla, remember that you help pay for it with your tax dollars. Good old corporate welfare. But the article I read in the Wall Street Journal about Hong Kong said that Teslas, because they must have had really big tax credits, because a Tesla that used to cost $75,000 is now $135,000. So that was a huge, bigger than our tax breaks. Anyway, my talented and very kind-hearted producer, Pete, was listening to NPR's Freakonomics radio, and Charles Koch from the famous Koch brothers was on. And you can tell me if I get any of this wrong, Pete. But evidently, Charles Koch agrees, you know, and he's the famous libertarian and owns a big conglomerate with his brothers. And he agrees that the economic and political system is rigged in his favor, and he wishes it wasn't. He is a libertarian, but you know, liberals today, they loathe liberty. They're afraid of it. They are cowards. You know, Rand Paul, who I am proud to say I voted for, he's our senator, one of our senators from Kentucky. He is the only senator, and the only person in Congress, for that matter, who is concerned about our 24/7 surveillance society and what that means for the Fourth Amendment. What it means is that the Fourth Amendment is just a piece of paper. So there's plenty of people who don't care about real competition. Now, not only are our leading business people cowards when it comes to competition, they are also cowards when it comes to their own workers' power. That's why they've had their lapdogs in Congress make it nearly impossible for unions to function or to even form. This kind of fear or cowardice is about greed. Greed, which is the fear of not having enough of something. You can be greedy for anything. You know, I don't think that I'm above all this. I have been greedy. You know, when I get greedy, when I start to run out so much. So, you know, everybody can feel greedy. Everybody can feel fear. But fear is not exactly cowardice, and I'm going to talk about that in a little while. Even though workers create the wealth by their labor, the employers don't want them to prosper. They don't want to share. They are afraid they don't have enough. They don't want to be just really rich. They want to be really, really rich. When unions are strong, everyone prospers. Companies prosper because workers with high wages create greater demand. And demand is the lifeblood of any economy. Companies without unions, say Eastman Kodak, didn't have a union, but they kept raising their wages in line with, because they had to compete for those workers. So it made them raise their game. And it was a contagious kind of prosperity. But you know what kills that kind of prosperity? Greed. The fear that you don't have enough. Greed is the most destructive type of cowardice there is. And I do believe it is why Jesus preached against greed a lot. He preached about sex, zero. He preached about greed, a lot. But what our elite cowards fear the most is any discussion of class. You know, workers versus owners, rich versus poor. The number one rule of our wealthy, privileged, protected elites is this: you must always divide and conquer the working class. Our elites in media, business, government never seriously talk about class. But they're happy to talk about the white working class. That's NPR's favorite phrase, white working class. Well, you know, it's not a white working class, it's just a working class. If you want to divide them, use that term. If you want to divide and conquer like NPR, those elite, rich people, then use, you know, the white working class, those deplorable racists that have been so vilified by NPR and the Democratic Party who cheats. Workers must always be divided, whether by race, gender, citizen status. Labor must always be weak. Unions must always be small and powerless. That is the rule of our elites. Our politicians, our representatives are mostly cowards who rushed to vote for an act of cowardice called the Patriot Act. They reduced our freedom in exchange for security. Our leaders fear freedom. The American people, trembling with fear, did not object to the Patriot Act in any real way. Which brings me to the biggest, the United States military. Islamic State captured Mosul in Iraq, the second largest city in Iraq, in 3 short days, with few casualties, mostly because the Iraqi army ran like cowards. And I say like cowards because I suspect those Iraqi troops were Sunni Muslims who secretly supported the Islamic State invasion. Well, Islamic State held Mosul for 3 years until we destroyed the entire city from the air. How many civilians, children, elderly, die when you destroy an entire city with bombs? Well, we'll never know because our so-called journalists are not asking. They are not inquiring. Bombing, airstrikes, drone strikes, these are the methods of cowards who will kill any number of children to protect our troops. Hardly a profile. If you're going to start a bunch of wars to get rich and to get revenge and to control people, then at least have the courage to fight on the ground that you are trying to take. And the cowards are the generals and the president. Less so the troops. They're mostly just kids and they have to follow orders. And I do support our troops, by the way. But our generals and our leaders are cowards. They are cowards. And this is a war we should have never fought. And we should have let the Sunnis make their own state. But that's a whole other show. We'll do that another time. The global coalition of cowards has destroyed the second largest city in Iraq. Mission accomplished. Aren't we proud of ourselves? Anti-globalism ain't globalism great? That hidden fist behind the hidden hand that can crush an entire city. Cowards are always trigger happy. Cops were this last year. And I think a lot of these cops who seem to be mostly afraid of black Americans have PTSD. And I think that's what's going on with these cops. And I think PTSD, from what I understand about it, is about overreacting and shooting unarmed 12-year-olds and shooting unarmed drivers of cars, people who haven't even committed a crime. That's cowardly, and it's overreacting. And you may have a medical reason for being cowardly, but it's still cowardly. And we should be screening out people with PTSD from all law enforcement, as well as the military. And it's not their fault. These kids in the military have been abused by the president and by these generals and by these colonels, these cowards. these cowards in uniform. Cowards in our Justice Department refuse to prosecute torturers, crooked bankers, and crime, including fraud. They are too cowardly to do their job because they're afraid of losing money. President Trump is the coward in chief who is ultimately responsible for destroying Mosul and killing so many thousands and thousands of civilians. And I'm just assuming this because I don't know how you can level a city into rubble. If you bombed Louisville into rubble, you would have to kill a whole lot of people. There's just no way you could say, okay, we're bombing this sector of town, everybody go over there. I don't recall that happening. The U.S. press, those non-journalists, those communication majors are the biggest cowards of all. They refuse to see the carnage in Mosul and at home. They are so in the pocket of our rich cowards. We are ruled by cowards. And we become cowards because the fish rots from the head down. We follow our leaders, and our leaders are. Except for maybe Rand Paul. Well, you know, bombs are very expensive with high profit margins. So the rich profit most from every kind of cowardice. The politically correct term for coward is risk averse. We are a rich nation, but not a great nation. Great nations are courageous. They take risks and risk everything for freedom like our founders. They risk their lives, their property for freedom, for our freedom. Now the traitorous, cowardly elites have taken freedom away. Digital technology is making us worse cowards. I've read that kids today don't call each other on the phone anymore because phone conversations are too intimate. They'd rather text. They're afraid to be human. They're afraid of relationships. Cowards. Cowards would not object to total 24/7 surveillance. A friend of mine recently told me she feels like she's being watched all the time. On the streets, at work, in the stores, in her car. Facial recognition, the creeps in the massive surveillance industry know who she is. She said she feels chilled, not the warm, creative light of freedom. Our brave new world of technology is a dark and fearful place. Google, Facebook, Samsung, Intel, Microsoft, Apple, their greatest accomplishment has been to make true freedom nearly impossible. Thus is the hard work of cowardice. How many deaths have we already died? 1,000? I figured out on a lighter note. Oops, wait a minute. Yes, I do. I figured out on a lighter note why I kind of like President Trump. He reminds me so much of Rodney Dangerfield in Caddyshack. And I loved Caddyshack, if you remember that movie. And I loved Rodney Dangerfield's character even more than my favorite comedian, Bill Caddyshack. But Rodney Dangerfield played some entrepreneur who was brash and rude, and he was being considered for membership in this stuffy country club. And he was just outrageous, and he did these most outrageous things. And when they were playing golf, he had this stereo built into his golf bag, and he had a bar in his golf bag, and his caddy was partying with him, and you could hear his music 3 holes over, and everybody was very, very upset about it. And Donald Trump has been disruptive in the same way, and he's disrupting a bunch of very uptight, elitist cowards who have destroyed our middle class. And I'm starting to really love the guy, and I really am hoping he has some success. Now, as the evidence-free gotcha Russian Trump investigation intensifies, the Democratic Party is still getting away with actually cheating in the 2016 election. They got away with the real election meddling. There is no investigation of elite Democrats, and don't expect one. Cowards fear the truth. Above all else, they fear the truth. And the truth they most fear is the truth that they are cowards. And what these elites, Democrats and elite Republicans and elite media people are doing is projecting their corruption onto President Trump. Just remember, it was the Democrats who cheated. And they cheated my man, Bernie Sanders. And they stole the money I gave to Bernie, in effect. And anybody else who supported Bernie was robbed by Debbie Wasserman Schultz. But she isn't the one who's really responsible. It was Hillary Clinton. She was the nominee. She's the head of the party. She is the cheater. So, they're projecting their corruption onto President Trump. And especially the corrupt press is doing that. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is when you act in spite of your fear. Thank you for watching Still Kicking with Billy Howard. We'll be back next Tuesday. That is, if we're still kicking. Be courageous enough to be free. Live up and remember, I love you all. Even if you're frightened little cowards. You can stop being cowards at any time. See you next week.